Let's talk for a minute about the difference between summary and original ideas. I'm going to start with some examples from a literature class, but summary is not just a problem in literature classes. It happens in a lot of different disciplines. Here's a perfectly good sentence that summarizes what happens in the short story The Yellow Wallpaper. The author presents the plight of a woman confined to a room ostensibly for her health. There's nothing wrong with that sentence. The word ostensibly is kind of fancy. If you're using it properly, you might be thinking that you're impressing your teacher. And yeah, sure, I'd be perfectly happy if I read a sentence that's free of grammatical errors. But I expect my college students can already construct decent sentences. Otherwise, they wouldn't have graduated from high school. So when I see a sentence like this, I think, okay, this entire sentence exists to summarize details from the assigned text. I already know what happens in that text, and I'm not asking you to write a paper so that I can find out what happened in the yellow wallpaper. I want you to demonstrate your ability to defend original thoughts about what you've read. So when I see a sentence that exists only to summarize, I jump ahead to the next sentence and see if that's any better. So if the next sentence is a description of what happens next in the story, here it's just describing another character, the narrator's husband, the secondary character in the yellow wallpaper, and describing that she's put in this room to cure her neurosis. Well, it's more summary. It tells me what happened in the story. And if your paper describes that the reader soon learns something, and by the time her husband discovers something, and then at this point in the story, and finally the author, what's happening is you're describing what happened next and what happened after that. And in these cases, when the sentences only exist to demonstrate your ability to paraphrase the contents of somebody else's work, these sentences are not adding value if what your professor wants is to assess your original critical thinking ability. Now, summary is not just a problem that happens in literature class. If the sentence simply exists in order to demonstrate that you remember an equation or that you remember a particular problem happened in a particular year, well, that sentence is summary. If you are writing sentences that list people or individuals or groups who've gone through a particular problem in the past, people who've faced certain problems in this literary work, or people who've faced certain problems over time, then what you're doing is you're summarizing non-controversial evidence that anybody who's looked up the information online would already know. If you're explaining the steps in a complex process, if you're explaining cell mitosis, or you're explaining how the solar system was formed, it's great if you can write good sentences. Sentences that you write that demonstrate you understand a process are not going to help you show your professor that you can analyze a process, or that you can come up with a theory, or you can defend a solution to a problem. If you are listing things that could be connected, if you're listing, what symbols could mean in a work of literature, or things that could be the results of a problem that you don't want to happen in society, you're listing things. And demonstrating that you can list stuff is not the same thing as demonstrating that you can defend a claim. If you are giving dictionary definitions of key terms, looking up what pops up online or what pops up on dictionary.com or a print dictionary, demonstrating that you can give an author's, a famous person's quote or a detail from an author's life, these are things that I would say are non-controversial, widely accepted fact. Listing these details, you're not demonstrating original critical thinking. Demonstrating how strongly you feel about something, how important a problem is, how big a problem is, comparing things and saying that this is kind of like that, or this is completely different from that. Yeah, you're kind of manipulating the pieces. If you're playing chess, you're kind of moving pieces around on the board, but I still don't know what moves you're going to make, so I don't know whether you are playing well. Okay, a chess metaphor there. In high school, you got some points for every detail that you managed to throw into that timed essay that you had to write during class to prove what you remembered from the lecture or from the assigned reading. At the college level, your professor already believes that you know how to skim a textbook chapter, store things in your short-term memory, and spit it back on a quiz. Usually, your college professors, if they give you a writing assignment, they're asking you to do something different. And here's an example of how we might return to that yellow wallpaper example. But on the right we have, because the narrator of the yellow wallpaper is a writer who rebels against her husband, readers may too quickly assume the narrator's experience matches the life of author Charlotte Perkins Gilman. So we have here the yellow section on the left. That is all summary. On the right, we have a little bit of summary. But the key difference is that word because. I've marked it in blue. It is a subordinating conjunction. If you could see my face, and I were saying, because the narrator of the yellow wallpaper is a writer who rebels against her husband, what I'm doing is I'm putting my finger up. I'm saying, hold on a second. I'm saying, listen, pay attention to me. I'm giving you some stuff, and I want you to let me say it before I get to my original point. So, because the narrator of the yellow wallpaper is a writer who rebels against her husband, comma, breath, I relax my posture, I sit back, and I slow down, and I say, readers may too quickly assume the narrator's experience matches the life of author Charlotte Perkins Gilman. That part in green is a point. It's a claim that I'm making. It's something original. Anybody who reads the yellow wallpaper would be able to identify, yep, okay, the narrator is a writer who rebels against her husband. That's true. But not everybody who reads the yellow wallpaper will make the jump to readers may too quickly assume the narrator's experience, blah, blah, blah. That stuff in the green is an original claim. The example on the left never gets to an original idea. So even if you write grammatically correct sentences, they're not going to help you in the way that linking your original idea to a little bit of summary, and it's not even a complete sentence worth of summary. It's a subordinate clause within a sentence that makes an original idea. The original idea is that readers may too quickly assume blah, blah, blah. That's the original thought. And the because is a subordinating conjunction that joins the non-controversial, uninteresting background information that any rational person would agree with. That's the beginning part of that sentence. In writing, try to put your original ideas, the important stuff, at the end of your sentence. Try to put your strongest ideas at the end of a paragraph. You start with what your readers will generally accept, with what any rational person who has background knowledge on the subject would agree with, and then you move gradually and carefully towards your more controversial statements, backing them up with evidence along the way. Here's another way we might get into an idea about this particular short story. Although Smith argues that gender plays an all-important role in the yellow wallpaper, Lee's recent study of men who underwent rest cure therapy in the early 20th century suggests that makes some original point. The word although that I marked in blue is a different subordinating conjunction. It brings in this magenta idea, this brief quotation from what Smith says. That magenta idea, that's a summary of what Smith argues. But notice that in the second example, there is no yellow section, in that this author of the second example does not fill up time just by repeating facts about the story. This student quickly gets to the fact that they're going to make a connection between what Smith has claimed and new information that Lee has brought up. And Smith and Lee may never have read each other's articles. This student is trying to make an original connection that uses these two little details, what Smith says and what Lee says, in order to make a new claim. So we've just looked at the difference between summary and original ideas, and the next item in this sequence is going to be about the filler phrase, there are, or it is, or there is. It's a common phrase that if you find yourself using it, you're probably introducing some summary that you could tighten up considerably with some revision.